We are very excited to do this today to kind of demystify the world of fiscal sponsorship. And full disclosure, the Film Collaborative, which Lynnette represents, is the fiscal sponsor for the D-Word and also for our documentality initiative. However, we don't consider this, we're not here to be an advertisement just for the Film Collaborative. There's a lot of amazing fiscal sponsors out there. In fact, we may have some other representatives from organizations that provide fiscal sponsorship joining us. If so, please feel free to also take advantage of what Doug just said about the shameless self-promotion and put that in the chat. And if you are a filmmaker who has worked with a fiscal sponsor that you really like and you want to share that with others, you can also feel free to share that in the chat. But I wanted to introduce Lynnette Gryseels. She developed and launched the Film Collaborative's fiscal sponsorship program and regularly advises filmmakers on fundraising strategies and sources, audience development, and film distribution strategies during the development and production process of filmmaking. And she has a long history of working with notable film organizations, including the American Film Institute, Film Arts Foundation, rest in peace, Film Arts Foundation, Women in Film, the Toronto International Film Festival, Sundance Film Festival, AFI Fest, and Hot Docs International Documentary Festival. But today we're going to focus on her work with the Film Collaborative. And maybe we could just start off, if you can tell us a little bit about what the Film Collaborative is, and then we can get into fiscal sponsorship more specifically.
Okay, thanks, Erica. It's really nice to be here, and so I appreciate being invited. The Film Collaborative was established in 2010, initially to educate and assist filmmakers with film distribution. And we quickly got into a conversation about what can we do to assist filmmakers earlier on in the process. And that's when we decided to add the fiscal sponsorship component. As far as the distribution side of things goes, TFC does consulting on distribution strategy, film festival strategy. We have a review your cut with sort of an eye to festivals take, and a film festival distribution program where it's a curated program where we get films in relationships with films around, or film festivals, sorry, around the world, and we will submit and negotiate screening fees and handle all the deliverables, the payments, everything from the festivals, and really treating the film festival run like a first distribution window. Now, I'm not the one that runs that, so that's the high level overview of it. We recently did 2 days called Distribution Days just a few weeks ago, and those sessions are all now, were recorded, are now available online, so on the Film Collaborative's website. And I even put that link right there to directly to Distribution Days if you're interested in watching them, those sessions. So fiscal sponsorship. What would you like to know, Erica?
Well, let's start with the basics. Like what does fiscal sponsorship mean?
Okay, so as a nonprofit organization, the Film Collaborative acts as a fiscal sponsor, and that means that we are able to help filmmakers access funding that requires a nonprofit to receive those funds. So that money usually comes from grants, private donations, crowdfunding if the filmmaker so chooses to combine a crowdfunding campaign with fiscal sponsorship. And we work specifically with Seed and Spark and Kickstarter on that because they specifically work with film. And we want you to get the best feedback and support for a film fundraising campaign. The need for fiscal sponsorship totally comes from the funder, because as you may have noticed, some funders don't require it and others do. So for example, if you got a Sundance grant. They're set up in such a way that they can give those funds directly. But for example, if you get a Catapult grant, Catapult requires a fiscal sponsor. So that's where we come in. And Catapult actually is a rare exception. They'll allow you to apply. If they give you a grant, then you can get a fiscal sponsor. I mentioned that because that's kind of rare. Normally a funder wants to know who your fiscal sponsor is at the time of application. Fiscal sponsorship is something that exists in the US only. No other country has it. There are a few variations out there, but it really does not in any case work like it does in the US. It's been around for 50 years or more, and it is used across all sectors. So I've always found in the film world that there's this assumption that this is a film thing, and it really is not at all. It's actually something that when I go to fiscal sponsor meetings, which I do regularly to ensure that I'm up to date on all of the issues that pertain to fiscal sponsorship, I'm the minority film person. And so yeah, it can be anything that you can think of that someone might have a nonprofit or charity. Fiscal sponsorship could work in that sector. And there are, I'll start with, there are two main models, although there are 6 models, there are 2 main models, and Model C is what the Film Collaborative uses. It's a re-granting model. Model A is where the fiscally sponsored project is actually a sub-project of the nonprofit organization where they are handling everything. It's sort of treated almost like a department. And with Model C, with the film project, you know, you are your own entity, and you can receive funds and pay your own bills. And that's really more appropriate for projects that are not intended to go on forever and ever.
Great. You anticipated my next question, and I actually just
Okay.
put something in the chat that, for those who are really intrigued by all these 6 different models, or I think it might even be 7 models now,
Yeah.
to kind of understand a little bit more about that. So, you're following the Model C, and I guess one question, that I know a lot of people have is, do they need fiscal sponsorship? And you kind of addressed that, but I wonder if you could go a little bit deeper into that, because I know that was already a question that came up in the chat.
So if you are applying for grants that require a fiscal sponsor, then yes. A good rule of thumb is if the grant funder requires it, they will say so. If they don't mention it at all in their guidelines, there's a probably they do not. It would be rare for them not to mention it, but then still require it. It has to come up somewhere. So like I said, the need comes from the funder, and it depends on how they are set up, if they can grant directly or if they need to grant through a nonprofit entity or fiscal sponsor. And then, of course, private donations require a fiscal sponsor when the donor wants a tax receipt, which is usually the case. Not too many people give large donations and don't want a tax receipt.
And so that kind of gives a sense of why you might want a fiscal sponsor. The other question I know I've gotten a lot is what are the pros and cons of working with a fiscal sponsor versus just setting up your own nonprofit organization, which can take those donations directly?
Okay. Setting up your own nonprofit is something that takes a long time to do. So usually requires a lawyer to help set it up. The turnaround time to get an answer from the IRS is often up to a year. So you have lawyer expenses, you have the expenses of setting it up, you have the time involved. And then the thing is, now you run a nonprofit. And so you really have to ask yourself, is this what I want to do? Because setting up that for one film, and then having to maintain it every year, And that involves accounting, having to have a board, having to have everything that is required to run a nonprofit organization. You really have to assess if that's what you want to do, or do you want to be a filmmaker and not have to be operating a side, uh, essentially a side gig. Unless, but on occasion, I have run into projects that they really, really focus on making films in a specific area. And so therefore, uh, they have set up a nonprofit because they're doing a lot in that area. It's kind of a huge package deal for them. But no, we would not recommend it to just set up one project. It would cost you way, way more.
Yeah, which I think a lot of folks in the chat are also referencing. And I will just note, I see a couple of questions in the chat. We are going to this up, for the last half hour of our discussion to questions, which we would prefer you ask on camera. We'll come back to that when we're close to opening it up to questions in terms of how to do that, because I may miss some things in the chat if it gets really chatty. So just to let you know that. So can you tell us, because I know a lot of times people are wondering about the whole application process for fiscal sponsorship and sort of what is the criteria you're looking at, what kinds of things, should people be, thinking about as they're putting together an application, because almost all fiscal sponsors will require some kind of application.
Mhm. The Film Collaborative uses the documentary core application. Actually, it's now called the nonfiction funding core application. And because that is actually a base grant application that was developed by consulting a lot of documentary funders and to compile their various versions of their applications and put them all into one so it's somewhat standardized, because we really realize that creating and writing grant applications when every funder has different criteria can be an incredible amount of work. So that is there to help with the fundraising process. Film Collaborative uses it because then your application to us is an application you can use moving forward to apply for grants. And for that matter, a lot of time donors, high net worth donors, uh, might want to see this. Some people will accept a deck, but some others want more information and they really want to read about it. And so it's just a really handy fundraising tool to have on hand, no matter what kind of fundraising you're planning on doing. And yeah, we require that application from everyone. We utilize it in a way that one of the rules of the nonfiction core application is don't change any questions, but you can eliminate questions if they're not applicable to your organization. So I've went through the latest version and eliminated a few questions that I felt like would not be applicable to both documentary and narrative film. We probably have a 70-30 split on docs to narrative. And so we definitely have a lot more docs, but we want that application to be able to be applicable across the board. And it is a base grant application. Narrative funders ask for the same thing.
Right. And yeah, and I guess the way I think of it is it's almost like your mini grant application, because it's like a proof of concept that you're ready to apply
Absolutely.
for grants or, approach fundraising in some different way. If folks will note, Julie has been kindly putting some links in the chat. So she did include a link to the nonfiction core application. And then because budgeting is such a key part of this, and maybe we can talk a little bit about budgets, she also included two links. One is an article from Documentary Magazine that Robert Bahar did about budgeting. He's sort of like a filmmaker who really, shares so much wisdom
Budgeting
about the
guru.
budgeting process. And we actually had him on. We did have him on a focused face-to-face. We did not record it at his request. However, we did do a session with him on our forum a few years ago, which you can still access if you are a professional member of the D-Word. And so Julie also included that link. But yeah, Lynette, let's talk a little bit about budgeting and sort of what sorts of things you're, looking for in a budget.
Okay. Yeah, we are looking for a real professional budget, and we do reference that article and the template as a great guideline to use. I refer to it often. I also refer to the D-word often in general. Uh, you know, sometimes if someone comes to us in, let's say, in development, what we might then look for is a development budget, because we realize that part of the development process is to create a more extensive budget for the whole project. So if you're coming super early, we will accept a development budget, but then what we would expect is at the end of the development process. That's a little bit of a vague term, because we also know that in, especially in documentary film funding, it's very common to be funding throughout the process. So you could kind of say that you're in development right up until the end. But we're looking for a full budget at some point when you start going into production. And yeah, we are looking for an industry standard format, because we know that that's what is required for you to go out and get funded. So it doesn't serve you well if we accept a budget that is a very basic word list of expenses, in a dozen lines, because we've seen that and then we send them back. To part of our role is to help educate you as filmmakers. If you need that sort of information, we'll refer you to here's how to set up a professional budget, and help you through the process. Our goal is completely to be on your team and to help you get your film funded and get it made and get it seen.
Right. Yeah, and actually, that brings me to another question, which is obviously the budgets are living documents. And so what you have budgeted, when you're in development may be very different than once you're in post-production or, funding an
Absolutely.
impact campaign or something like that. So how does that work in terms of the fiscal sponsor? Are you being updated on that budget?
Yes, we actually have a process once a year for annual reporting. But at any time during the year, if you have substantial changes to your budget, just send it over and we'll add it to the file. And then once a year, we do the annual reporting process, where it's really just a status update. It's your latest budget, and it's if you received money. Now that means if you raised money, but actually it was paid out to you in the previous fiscal year, how did you spend it? Because the Film Collaborative, as fiscal sponsor, is required to show that we have oversight over funds and that they are being spent on project expenses according to the budget that we have on file. And no one's taking vacations or spending it on other things. And that whole process helps us fulfill our requirements and be able to offer the program.
So, with that in mind, and kind of from the fiscal sponsor's perspective, because I know a lot of times what people are looking at are the fees, and they feel like that's the most important thing. I need to know, how much they're going to charge me in additional fees, and I want the lowest one possible. So I'm curious to know, like, what do those fees actually cover?
Okay. So there's actually been a movement in the fiscal sponsor world to start referring to them as costs, because they really are program costs to all of the back end costs that go into offering the program. And that includes everything from technology, accounting, me, anyone that touches the program in any way, that's all got to get paid for. The lights, literally, like figuratively, I guess, because you can see them at my home, need to be kept on. So those are costs of offering the program. And the Film Collaborative's cost is 5% of funds raised. So that means if you raise other money that doesn't come through the program, there's no fee on that. It doesn't come through us, only on funds that come through the program.
So, what might be some examples of funds that would not need to come through fiscal sponsorship?
Let's say you get investment money, or grants, for example, that don't require fiscal sponsorship. that money can all go directly to a film project and not have to go through us. So
Okay.
we're here to help facilitate the funding that the donor or funder requires the existence of a nonprofit so that they can get their tax receipt usually. But I guess I should expand on that. It's not just about a tax receipt. A lot of funders, what they want out of a fiscal sponsor is to have an entity that has the oversight over the project, because they may be a very large program or not have the bandwidth, or for whatever reason, they actually rely on the fiscal sponsor to ensure that the funds are being spent properly, that all the accounting and reporting is done. And so there's a lot that goes along under the hood that isn't seen. I just saw something pop up about it adds credibility, because it definitely does, because it shows that the project has been vetted and we support it. And the Film Collaborative, we do vet projects. We look for strong applicants in that it's a good story. It should be told, is not a duplication of something else out there right now. The filmmaker and filmmaking team are qualified and have the support behind them to execute the project. So that means first-time filmmakers have the support. We absolutely support first-time filmmakers. Is the budget appropriate to the project? Is it super high or super low? Back to the budgeting topic, actually. What we often see is budgets that are too low, and that the filmmakers are paying themselves almost as if they're trying to present the project to a funder. Look at how low my budget is, and therefore you'll want to fund it because this is inexpensive. But the other side, the optics of that from the funder's point of view, is you're not paying yourself. That's not sustainable. That means you're doing something else to support yourself and you're not working on this project. It also, they want it to be professional, sustainable. Kind of lost my train of thought.
Just in terms of like when people under budget, sort of what are the,
Yes.
issues with that?
No funder wants their name in the credits of a discount film. And so if your budget is super low and you are skimping on things that are going to make it look great on screen, no funder's going to want their name on that. And so that's a totally different approach to thinking about it. No funder is thinking, well, this one's only $100,000, so I'm totally going to fund that because what a deal. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I've seen so many budgets where people don't even pay themselves. They don't have a line in there to pay themselves. And I think that's always sort of a little bit of a red flag, even though we know the realities of fundraising. I mean, you may be the last to get paid, but
absolutely.
But
in the world of documentary film funding, there is a movement to see filmmakers pay themselves. They spent a lot of work over that in probably like the last 5 years. It's important because, yeah, if you're not paying yourself, you have to do something else, and you're not making films.
Yeah. So you mentioned some other things that the Film Collaborative does, and I'm curious, aside from the program cost as opposed to the admin fee, what are some other things that filmmakers should consider when they're applying for fiscal sponsorship, in terms of, what the fiscal sponsor offers beyond the actual fiscal sponsorship?
Well, first I'll talk about the program, because although there are certain aspects of fiscal sponsorship and various different fiscal sponsors that work the same, there are also differences. So do you get to talk to the person, or is it nothing but email and nothing, you've never spoken to an actual human? How responsive are they? Do they assist in any way in the fundraising process? So what the Film Collaborative does, what I do, is a lot of I advise on how to fundraise. I do not specifically do the fundraising for you, and I don't write grants for you. In order for as I said, the fee for our program is 5%. So at 5% of funds that have not been raised yet, there's no way I could be writing grants for 200 projects. You're making one film, I'm working on 200 plus. So that is part of how that works. But I certainly can advise on where to look, how to approach funders, which is super important. How not to approach funders. And I always say, if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice when approaching private donors. And then as far as grant funders, a couple do's and don'ts. Approach the grant funder in a succinct way that indicates that you have read the information on their website and you're asking a unique, thought out question. Do not ever contact a funder and ask what their deadline date is or something that's splashed on their homepage. Because what you're doing then is identifying yourself as someone who doesn't do their homework, and funders are looking for filmmakers they want to work with and who can, that will work with others, that can follow directions, that are going to do their own legwork and find out information. They're looking a lot of times for filmmakers that they can have a long-term relationship with. It's not just one grant. And so present yourself as someone who a funder might want to work with.
Great. So we do have the D-Word has a lot of members who are outside of the United States, including some who've joined us today. So I guess I'll ask a question on their behalf, which is, how does this impact projects that maybe are originating in another country? Does someone need to have like a US co-production partner to qualify for fiscal sponsorship? What is the reasoning they might want to consider fiscal sponsorship?
So we work with a lot of international projects, and it can work in a variety of ways. They may have a US partner, or they may be completely based in another country. The requirement is, are you looking for funding from US sources that require fiscal sponsorship? And so if the answer to that is yes, then we can act as fiscal sponsor. And it might be grant money, it might be a donation. We can pay that money out to a country, any other country, except for anything that US has sanctions against, of course we can't do. So it doesn't matter where you're located. All it matters is, are you getting funding from the US that requires a fiscal sponsorship?
Great, thank you.
We have a lot of Canadian projects because I'm Canadian. I seem to attract Canadians.
Yes. Awesome. Go Canada. So what about crowd? You mentioned earlier that you have relationships with Seed and Spark and Kickstarter. So can we talk a little bit about crowdfunding campaigns and whether it's typical for those to run through a fiscal sponsor or run outside of a fiscal sponsor?
Yes, absolutely. So it's your choice. Do you want to combine a crowdfunding campaign with a fiscal sponsor or not? You can do it directly, or you can do it with a fiscal sponsor. The question you might want to ask yourself is, will the fact that it is now combined with fiscal sponsorship, making it a philanthropic project, charitable, will that attract more donations? Will it attract higher donations? And it's funny, I would say that it's almost psychological. We all file taxes every year, and you probably are aware that a tax receipt for $25 is not going to help you. However, when the project is charitable and has fiscal sponsorship, it's almost like it flips a psychological shift in people's minds, and makes, because of that philanthropic side of people, they want to contribute. So it's really you assessing your audience, your potential donors, to decide if this is something that would benefit the project anecdotally, I can tell you that the filmmakers that do combine it always tell me that yes, they had comments from people that one of the reasons they donated was because they could get a tax receipt, or they donated more because they could get a tax receipt. Uh, so it's really up to you if you want to do that. And yeah, but we do only work with Kickstarter and Seed and Spark. And actually, Indiegogo is kind of coming back into the film world. They really were not involved in film for quite some time. But they're like, people could do a film campaign on their website, but there was no particular support for that. And now there is. So we've been talking to them as well.
Great. Thank you. And I know there are some fiscal sponsors, I think IDA might be one of them, that also built their own their own crowdfunding platform. That
Yeah, we have a version of that as well. If you go to our website under fiscal sponsorship, sponsored projects, you'll see all of the projects that we sponsor can have a page. Most filmmakers do choose to have a page. On occasion, maybe a project is early on and is confidential or something. There's a reason why it's not online, but that is probably 80 to 90% of the projects that we have do have a page. And so that the project can get online donations, and you can sort of run a crowdfunding campaign doing that. Let me see. But the only thing is, it doesn't work like a crowdfunding campaign where there's a thermometer, you can see how much is raised and who donated and all that. But definitely we do get a lot of online donations for projects. When someone makes an online donation, as we all know, whenever you use a credit card, someone pays a fee. And usually it's the merchant when you are like using it in a retail situation. So that fee can be covered by the donor. We use our payment processor is PayPal. PayPal has an option where they can, you can, as a donor, you can opt in to cover that fee. We get a nonprofit rate, so it's 2.2% instead of 2.9%. And most donors cover it, not all, but a lot of them do. I would say more than half for sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the D-Word, we do an annual campaign towards the end of the year, sort of the end of the year, beginning of the new year.
Yes, you saw that.
And so, and I know we were talking a little bit about that yesterday because you were saying, yes, it takes the same amount of work on my end to do, to manage a $25 donation as a $250,000 donation. So I just posted our link so people could see what a project page looks like. And you can welcome to make a donation if you want. We accept them all year long. But yeah, and then there's a couple questions that I am catching in the chat, so I will, address those, and then probably in about 10 minutes or so, we'll open it up for broader questions.
I just
But
want to add that back to the online donations,
yeah,
when a donation is made, it triggers an automated email that goes to the filmmaker. So as Erica and Doug and the rest of the D-Word team knows, every time they got a donation, especially during that end of year campaign, their inbox were likely full of donation notifications. So it's really great. You get real-time notification of it.
yeah,
Yeah,
because we tend to, I think an automated thank you goes out, but we also like to send a personal one, which is something I would recommend to anybody who's doing whether a crowdfunding campaign or just, putting it out through a donation link, that it's really important to thank your donors.
absolutely. Yeah, don't just rely on our tax receipt. Do a personal thank you. This is a relationship you have with these people. They are your audience. They are your potential future donors. And so always be gracious and thank your donors.
Right. So I'm just kind of scrolling up to see some of the questions that have come up, and if I miss yours, we'll have time to open it up. So one question somebody had to do with sort of geographic requirements, that there might be, like a state level funder, or a funder who only funds projects in particular places. And
Sure.
the question is sort of, is that based on where the project is based or where the fiscal sponsor is based? And if it's the latter, is it possible for people to have multiple fiscal sponsors for that reason?
So it depends on the funder. So, for example, NISCA is one that always comes up, and they require a fiscal sponsor that is in New York State. So in cases like that, where we are already working with a project, they want to apply for NISCA, we just say, yes, go get a New York-based fiscal sponsor for that grant. You don't need multiple fiscal sponsors for your project unless that rare situation comes up, and it really is rare. It's not often. That's why I bring up NISCA, because it's one of the examples of it. But every now and then some organization will want to grant in that state or in that city or something. It's their way of keeping funding in that community. And so in those cases, absolutely, we say get a fiscal sponsor there, make sure that they know that you're working with us already and that you'll be using them for this grant. You don't need multiple, as I said, because if you look at it is, even though we're a nonprofit, it's still a business, right? We have to keep our lights on, and the whole setup for fiscal sponsorship is we're putting in a lot of work with the projects. We do like to have a personal touch and be part of the team. And so if you have multiple fiscal sponsors and we are all working with you in that way, but grant money can only go through one fiscal sponsor, it does mean that other people, we have to appreciate and support our communities by not making more than one organization do all of the same work for you, and then only one of them gets paid.
Yeah. And there's been some
Uh,
additional stuff in the chat. And to answer Jackie's question, just to repeat that, why would you need more than one fiscal sponsor? The example we are using is largely if there's a geographic requirement by a funder to have a fiscal sponsor based, in that state. But then someone else asked, they said that some fiscal sponsors don't want you to have more than one fiscal sponsor. How do you
and
navigate
I
that?
have, yeah, my explanation of
Yeah.
absolutely, because of that reason, it's not needed for one thing unless you have a specific grant. But yeah, you have more than one organization working for you essentially for free, and we have to support each other. And I actually really want to point out that when I know the other fiscal sponsors, we all like have each other's numbers. We can call. And we use each other as resources. Like, hey, I'm faced with this situation. What do you think? What would you do? So we are colleagues. We are not competitors. And sometimes people come to me and ask questions in such a way that it's almost like they're trying to say, well, I might go over here. Why should I go with you? They want me to pitch them. And what I really want to communicate is that we are colleagues, we do work together, we are friends. We want you to do what is best for you in your project. I will not try to steal a project from another fiscal sponsor ever. If you're already working with someone, I'll say congratulations if you're happy, stay there.
And that actually brings up another question, because I have been in situations where I started with one fiscal sponsor, switched to another. I know a couple people in the chat have also noted that. So in terms of, because when you, apply to and get accepted into a fiscal sponsorship program, you're essentially signing some kind of agreement or contract.
Mhm.
So with regard to that, what should people be looking for, in the language of those contracts? Do they need to have a lawyer review them? What is sort of your take on that?
Essentially, it sets up the relationship, which is absolutely required to be able to offer fiscal sponsorship. And some funders will even ask for that agreement so that they have that on file and they have proof that there is an actual legal agreement in place. It states the fee, it states the reporting requirements, the crediting requirements. It says that you fully own the project. We have no rights or ownership of it. So that's really good for you to know that we're putting that in writing, that we don't own anything. What to look for. Some people have a lawyer go over it, and some people go ahead and read it and sign it. I do recommend always read it. If you have questions about what something means, because it is written in legal language, ask me. I will explain it. What else can I say in that regard? Anytime we get questions or requests for changes, we look at what are those requests? What is the special circumstance that might require it? Because the fiscal sponsorship agreement, it's not like a distribution agreement, for example, where it's a starting out point for a negotiation. It is the agreement. It's a standard agreement that fiscal sponsors have. And there is a reason it says a lot of the things that it says, so that we can operate the program in a way that the IRS will be happy with. So, and it is completely fair and transparent. We are here to help you. We are not taking anything from you. So I think I would say the Film Collaborative is very transparent. If you look at our website, you'll see that it's really packed full of information. And we want people to feel like they're in good hands.
Yeah, and I think that any good fiscal sponsor will have a lot of those questions answered, on their website. I know, Julie, you had earlier posted the FAQ from the Film Collaborative site, so feel free to post that again, because I think it's a really good resource for people, and especially if you're thinking of reaching out to Lynnette with additional questions, definitely read the FAQ first. To make sure the
It's
question isn't
expensive,
always
I admit.
answered. Yeah.
But
Um,
really, those questions are there because they have all been asked enough times that I decided to post the question. And so, and when we do speak with filmmakers, the idea is that you've read that, and then now you have next level questions based on what you read that are a little more specific to your project and your situation.
yeah. So let me see, maybe I'll ask one last question and then we'll start to open it up. I'm sure I have some additional questions I can ask, but let me think there was something very specific you talked about that I wanted to follow up on. And I guess it had to do, I mean, there's a lot of questions in the chat that are like broader fundraising questions, which I know we're not getting too in the weeds of fundraising. We may want to do another session. We have done some on fundraising, so you can look for those on our YouTube channel. But I guess one other question was about it was kind of a bigger picture question about that question about why people donate. And the fact that you said that somebody's making just a $25 donation, most likely they're not going to reach that threshold to have it actually have a tax implication. But I wonder, does it also go back to that credibility that people are more willing to donate if they feel like, oh, there is a nonprofit organization sort of,
For sure. Yeah,
backing.
it just adds credibility. It makes it look legit, especially when you're starting out. Uh, it shows that someone is supporting you and the project. It's a little more official looking,
Yeah.
and I think that is helpful for people. What we look for when in an application, when you get to the fundraising stage, is really because I think I explained earlier, like, is it a good project? Can it be executed? Is the budget appropriate? And then we segue into paying yourself or not. But really, then what we're looking for is this is a fiscal sponsorship program. When you apply, know why you are applying. Don't just apply because you think you want to have it, but you don't really know why or have a reason. So we at the Film Collaborative specifically is looking for projects that know why they're applying and can tell us why they're applying and what grants they're applying for, or maybe they have private donors lined up or whatever it is. That if you have a reason for fiscal sponsorship, and your application is complete, there you will probably be greenlit.
Yeah. So Francel brought up something that I had wanted to ask you about as well, which is, there's maybe, I guess, 10, 15, film and arts specific fiscal sponsors that use this Model C agreement or version, and so model rather. But sometimes people might be making a film that's on a specific issue, and there might be an interest in, oh,
Sorry to
well,
interrupt. I used Model B. I think a lot of
okay.
people use Model B where it just covers that particular project from start to finish. That's it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't
Model C does
referencing
as well.
yours in particular, but just that the Film Collaborative and a lot of the other film funders, or sorry, fiscal sponsors use Model C. Some may also do others, Model B or Model A. But what I was going to ask was specifically about working with nonprofits that might be, aligned to the particular
Absolutely.
topic. And what
Yes.
does that look
So
like in terms of a potential fiscal sponsorship?
it's really up to the filmmaker what kind of fiscal sponsor they're looking for. And so you will get certain support when working with a film specific fiscal sponsor that you will not get, say, if you're making an environmental film and using an environmental fiscal sponsor. They're going to be experts on environmental topics, but they will not be very well informed on film. That may or may not be an issue for you, but that is something to consider whether or not you want an issue-based fiscal sponsor or a film-based fiscal sponsor, and you can go either way.
Yep, great. Well, why don't we start to open it up to questions? If you'd like to ask a question, if you can use the raise hand function, which I believe for most of us, if you go to sort of the bottom of the screen, there should be something that says reactions. I have like a new version of Zoom, so it's just like a heart. But if you click on that, there should be a raise hand option. And I see Christine has already found it. So let's bring Christine on screen and ask your question.
Hi, Lynette. This is
Hi.
Christine Gold, and you are our fiscal sponsor for our film In the Name of Hope. And this is so helpful. I'm so glad that you're here talking to the D word because just hearing about it from this other side. So my question is, you said you really want to. I reviewed you. My producer Stephen Ullman, he's the one that
Yep.
had the conversation with you and loves you.
Yeah,
Told me
he's great.
whatever, and we were going to get together and whatever, but you were talking about really wanting to be part of the team in a sense, and that's something that I, as a collaborative person, I love. But so what is the kind of dynamic that you ideally like to have? How often do you like to be communicated? We've got so much that's happened. Do you like to get an occasional email? Do you like to get a Zoom every so often? What's an ideal relationship?
Yeah, it does depend from project to project because we want to work in ways that work best for the project. Sometimes with projects, I do get occasional email updates, or if you're applying for grants, a heads up, hey, we applied for these grants. On occasion, we do get contacted by the grant funder, so it's really helpful if I have a heads up. So if grant funder does contact me, I can speak from a place of knowing as opposed to a place of, oh, really? Okay. Like
They
I
didn't
didn't
tell
know.
me.
So, it does have that more buttoned up approach, optics wise. So yeah, and sometimes I always do that initial consultation like you referenced with my meeting with Stephen. But yeah, later on, sometimes we do schedule another Zoom and we'll just talk about your fundraising plans, what you've done so far, what haven't you done yet. I can give you feedback of what I know works. And like I've actually been doing this for a really long time now. And yeah, I can give you feedback on what I've seen work. And I've actually learned over the years that when someone's doing something really unconventional that I've never heard of, or maybe I have heard of it before, and it's so unconventional, it wasn't successful. So I can tell you what I've seen, what works, what doesn't work, where to look for funding, like what stones to look under and turn over that might be helpful for your specific project based on who you are, what your topic is, where you are, all kinds of things to consider that might be helpful in your fundraising plan.
That's great. Thank you. And do you I mean, normally deal with just the producer or the director too, or what's
Again, it depends on the project because
it all is, it depends.
some directors are just directing. They have nothing to do with this. Others are very like, producer directors. When it comes to who the contacts are that I work with on a project, you guys self-identify. You tell me who is going to be doing the fundraising and who's best to talk to me that can, let's say, do financial reporting, that can invoice, that can is handling the fundraising. That we call it a primary and secondary.
And that's that. Yeah,
But
I
really
don't want to.
because there's like 2 slots. And they're
I don't
numbered.
want to take more of your time, but yeah, that's my sense of it. But thank you so much. You guys are wonderful. I wish we had known. We did a Kickstarter campaign.
Yep.
It didn't even occur to us to loop you into it because there was this sense of some people have the tax benefit through you and some people didn't. And it would have that's a really, I think, for anybody thinking about doing a Kickstarter campaign that does have a fiscal sponsor, it would have been really nice because to not be like, well, you can get a tax deduction if you go this way, but you don't if you go.
I did see some come in during your campaign on the side, but
Yeah.
absolutely, especially your film, it's on homelessness, and that's a very philanthropic topic.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, let's bring up Aviva.
Hi, Lynnette and Erica. Thank you guys so much for everything. I'm a first-time filmmaker, and I recently started a relationship with a nonprofit that has nothing to do with film. And I was just talking about my film that's in development stage, and they were like, "Oh, we'll be your fiscal sponsor." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I didn't even know that that was a thing.
Mhm.
That I needed or that was attached to some grants. So I guess my question is like, they're in a different industry. Does that matter? I know, Lynette, you just mentioned like if someone is in a different, if they are proficient at the project. I mean, if they're proficient in the field or if they're proficient in film. You spoke about that, but not a completely different industry. And then also, what should I ask them different from kind of what you spoke about today, which was, the contracts, the program type, the percentages?
Yeah, review their contract for sure. And it's good that they've said that they are a fiscal sponsor, because on occasion we hear that someone is making a film about X topic, and a nonprofit they've been in discussions with about other things said, "Oh, we can act as fiscal sponsor for you," but they don't usually act as a fiscal sponsor. 9 times out of 10, they come back to us and say, "Actually, we need someone who's a real fiscal sponsor," because there's a lot that goes on under the hood and then the other organization may not know about, and so the learning curve would be steep for them.
Interesting. So it's not just them funneling the money and giving it to me.
No, it's a lot more. There's a lot that like accounting wise, reporting wise, this is a very important that it is done properly, because we really want to preserve the fact that in the US we are allowed to do this. No other country is allowed to do this. Let's not lose it. Because this is amazing. When I talk to, and I mentioned Canada earlier, the filmmakers and everyone there is chomping at the bit, wishing that they had this, because there is no way to get money out of one sector into the filmmaking sector, because they have that invisible wall of fiscal sponsorship is not allowed, and so the funders cannot give that project money without, and they don't get the tax benefit. It doesn't work for them. So it's really important that it's done properly. Make sure they are official fiscal sponsors, and that they're transparent in the information on how they operate and communicate. And
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you. I
I
really
think that covers
appreciate it.
it.
Thank you. So actually, with that in mind, before we go on to our next audience question, there's a term that used to always make me bristle when I was working as a fiscal
Mhm.
sponsor, which is the term pass-through. Can you
Yes,
tell us
no,
about that?
There's a few dirty words in the world of fiscal sponsorship. Pass-through is definitely at the top of the list. Funnel, umbrella, fiscal agent, all bad words. I guess that last one was 2 words. And the reason is because that implies that money is going through without any oversight. We're blind to it. All we're doing is almost laundering money. That is bad. We don't do that. We are careful. We are handling millions of dollars every year, and we are very buttoned up about it. Our accounting is top notch and on point, and we keep track of every single penny. And we report to the IRS. We go through an annual audit every year, which I don't know if anyone here gets audited, but that's an extensive process. So the implication that money is just coming through and we're not even evaluating anything is bad. And so those words, and I think in our FAQs is actually one of the ones at the top is what's the difference between a fiscal sponsor and a fiscal agent. And a fiscal agent is that more, it actually doesn't really exist. It's kind of this term that people use, but it's not even really a real thing. But it certainly implies that there's no oversight. Fiscal sponsor in the definition of it is what it's actually called, and it does involve all of those things happening under the hood that if we're doing it well, you don't notice.
Great, thank you. Ala.
Yeah, thank you so much for the information. I appreciate it. A quick question about something that still is not clear for me. Do you know how the tax deductible donation work from the IRS end? I mean, is there a percentage that donation amount will be deducted by the IRS or something?
Okay, so the way tax deductions work is all donations are fully tax deductible as allowed by law. And that means that when you make a charitable donation, what that does is it lowers your taxable income. So let's just say, well, you, myself, and Erica, we all make $100,000 because we have nice round numbers here. We all gave $20,000 to charity. Now that makes our taxable income, assuming there are no other deductible expenses, now we're at $80,000. But how we get taxed on the remaining $80,000 also depends on, like I said, all of those other expenses. So it will lower your taxable income, but don't get into you'll save X amount of money, because none of us can know that. Only the person's personal accountant will know that information because it's all based on their financial situation. But any donor, just tell them it's fully tax deductible, and that's really the most important thing.
Yeah, one of the things we use in language for our outreach for the D-Word is we'll say this donation may be tax deductible, and that way, it can qualify if you are paying taxes in the United States. But again, it's going to depend on your particular situation. So,
Mhm.
so thank
One
you.
thing that we actually haven't talked about yet that I'll jump in on right now is the two different types of donors. High net worth donors and people like me, you and I, presumably, not high net worth people. The high net worth people have a budget for giving. So when you're asking those people for a donation, you are not asking for money that if they don't donate to you, they're keeping. They're not making a financial decision on, can I afford it? They actually know that they are going to donate X amount of money in this fiscal year because that's what they've already worked out with their financial people. And so what they are looking for are causes that are important to them that they would like to donate to. So the question there is really, would you direct your charitable dollars toward this worthy project? As opposed to when you ask me personally for a donation, I might donate $100 to your project, but if I don't, I'm keeping it. So
And-
that's very distinctive approaches for donors there.
And I think that's also important for people to understand that even the word grant can mean different things because, you know, a lot of us think of it, oh, as this thing that we have to apply for and we're competing with all these other people. But there are also, you know, family foundations, donor advised funds, you know, so where someone is just, you know, who has some money and is already primed to donate it is just going to donate to your project. And there may not necessarily be reporting required or even a formal application process, but you know.
Absolutely. So donor advised funds, those are really private donations. The difference is people put money, it's an investment account, they put money in, and when they put money in, they get that tax receipt for that time. That money can sit in that account for a day, a year, years, until they allocate it. So when they allocate it, it's already sitting in a charitable fund. They have money to give. That's what it's for. Other times money just comes from them directly. It might come out of an account, or it might actually come in the form of a stock donation. That's also very popular because there's an extra advantage to stock donations. When someone donates stock, it comes from their brokerage account to the Film Collaborative brokerage account. We sell it. They get a tax receipt for the amount that it's sold for. And then, but they don't pay capital gains tax on the sale of that stock because they didn't sell it. And so that's highly attractive for people wanting to get money out of the market. So this is like money that's not liquid, and if they do liquidate it, they'll pay tax. So this is a way to help achieve their giving goals and avoid that tax. It's completely normal and legal. We have links on our website to financial institutions that will further explain this in financial technical terms.
Great, thank you for the the sort of little tax lesson. And
Yeah,
actually,
sorry,
I know
segue out there.
Joanne has a question, so I'll let her ask hers first. But that actually raised another question for me. So let's bring Joanne on screen.
Okay, hi.
Thanks, Erica. Hi, Lynnette. Were you just in Milwaukee at the Milwaukee Film Festival?
I wasn't, but my colleague Kathy Suska was.
Yes, I met Kathy.
Okay.
My question is, I've been approached by some venture capitalists
Okay.
who are curious about how they can put money into films. And I don't know if that comes under the heading of, would I need a fiscal sponsor for some venture capitalist to give me money, because it wouldn't necessarily be a donation, right?
If it's not a donation, it's an investment because they want it back. And so you would not use a fiscal sponsor for that.
Okay, but some of these venture capitalists also have foundations on the side.
And if it is a donation coming from a foundation, then you would probably want a fiscal sponsor to facilitate that donation.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. If investment money does not come through the fiscal sponsorship program, they don't get a tax receipt for an investment because the tax receipt says that they don't get any money back and that there was no goods or services received. So if someone were to make an investment and route it through the Film Collaborative, I unknowingly issue a tax receipt, but this is actually an investment. They have an investment agreement. They're getting the money back. That's called fraud. And the IRS frowns upon that. And you do not want to do that because once they get on you once, they will be on you for the rest of your life. So no, don't do that.
Thanks, Joanne, for that question. And the question I was going to ask, which is, you know, when you were talking a little bit about the stock options and donations, and that is something the Film Collaborative does. Not every fiscal sponsor necessarily accepts that. One other thing that I think is unique for you is that you also can manage some in-kind donations. So can you talk a little bit about what sorts of donations would qualify as in-kind donations?
Sure. So goods and services can qualify as an in-kind donation. So for example, let's say someone donates craft services. That is something that we can provide an acknowledgement of. And so the the letter that we issue will go something, thank you so much for supplying craft services on this date to this date for this many people. And then the project is fiscally sponsored by the Film Collaborative. No goods or services were received in exchange. It did not have a dollar amount on it, because this is a business that then will take this letter, and when they do their taxes the following year, they will be able to have this letter. It has our EIN nonprofit number on there, and they quantify the value of that because they're a business, and so they can easily say, this is what we charge for that. If we had charged, this would have been the amount. In contrast, for example, let's say your friend offers to edit the film for free. The IRS will not accept that as an in-kind donation. They consider that volunteer work. And so it's really the IRS that's making that decision. It's not us, but we just happen to know what the rules are. And so, but the gray areas, like, let's say the free editing is coming from a post-production company, we can give them that acknowledgement. We just can't give personal, or the same thing as if an actor in a film can't qualify that as an in-kind donation. The IRS will say no.
So I know Francel has a question, but there was also a question that came up a couple times in the chat, which I thought we addressed, but let's get back to it, which has to do with sort of, sometimes films are not just films. They're like part of a whole impact campaign, or, there might be a companion book or a museum exhibit or something like that. So would that still be part of something that could be considered for fiscal sponsorship?
Yeah, we would consider that. We understand that, and definitely we work with impact campaigns all the time, and that's directly related to the film, of course. So we can provide fiscal sponsorship for films anywhere from, the first day you thought of it to the very end of distribution and everything in between. If you are doing other things that are related to the film, and there is a companion book, for example, yes, we would consider that. But if it was just a book, no film involved, then we would say, then we're not really, that's not what we specialize in. I wouldn't be able to give any, I wouldn't be able to advise very well on how to raise money for a book only. So, we try to stay in our lane.
Okay. Francel.
Hi, thanks. This is interesting because when I got my sponsor, it was a long time ago. I was curious, maybe you addressed this, but I don't think so. My model was model B over C. I did a quick Google. It looks like maybe C kind of is pretty similar to that, but I was wondering if you could speak to the differences and if you do both or what's predominant. And also, the fee of 5% just seems insanely good. Are you guys outliers in that, or was it recently common for
We've always offered
places to
5%.
reduce it? Sorry?
We've always offered 5%.
Okay.
Years ago, when I was at Film Arts Foundation, where it was my training ground for fiscal sponsorship, I believe they were 7%. A lot of fiscal sponsors are 7 for film.
Yeah.
We're 5. We just always started at 5, and we've stayed there. As far as the differences between C and B, I'd almost have to get the book out. I literally do have a book though.
So they are close then. I'm not wrong about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
the two predominant models are A and C.
Oh.
And with A being a sub-project of the fiscal sponsor, C being the project is independent. And B has some nuances. There's some other models that are like slight nuances. And I'd have to pull the book to actually read about B.
I'm really surprised A is common. I just thought it was usually for something with the goal of becoming its own nonprofit.
A is probably even more common. And when I go to fiscal sponsor meetings, they are often A-centric. And so Model C people are fighting for some airtime.
Okay.
Yeah, because someone might have a Model A or fiscal sponsorship relationship indefinitely and never create their own 501c3, and that's just fine. Model
But why
C
would a film need it? Why would a film that's starting and ending need a Model A?
you wouldn't. No, it wouldn't be the right model for a film.
But didn't you say that that's most of what you guys do?
Oh no, we do Model C.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought
Yeah,
you said
Model
Model
A
A was
is
the most
for
common. It's really
you are like have a ongoing nonprofit that is for something that is I don't know, could go on forever. You're raising money and doing good work for homelessness or something like that.
yeah. Okay. So I misheard.
Yeah.
Okay. Got
It's
it.
not intended to end with the film. It's intended to, you're gonna finish the film, you can distribute it, maybe do an impact campaign, and then you're done with that.
Yeah, and I think I just quickly took a look at that link that Julie's posted a couple times about the different models, which is based on that book that you're referencing, Lynette. And so I think Model B, the difference is you're considered an independent contractor of the nonprofit, which I
So
think
in
is
Model C,
okay.
oh, I see. I literally have the books.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like if you want to read it. There's a newer version here. I refer to them all the time.
Right.
Erica,
So
can I just say one thing because I brought
yeah,
up the film thing, just especially to Aviva, because I mentioned it in the chat going with an issue-based org, but I did stress I think it should be a last resort. I almost went with one, and I'm kind of glad I didn't because it can bring up, I think, like, problems. It's sort of like if you're close to an issue and they might feel just like for a narrative film, sometimes like a producer wants to put their mediocre actor like relatives in your movie as extras or something. Like they might somebody prominent at the head of an org might really be like, I should get at least 6 minutes in your doc. And they might not be very charismatic and they might not be the best people, to do that. So having, I think, the distance turned out to be a healthier kind of way to go about it because, Fractured Atlas cares, but they don't care too much.
They're a very large fiscal sponsor. They do projects over a number of arts disciplines.
Yeah.
They put a lot of money and effort into creating their back-end technology, which if you don't really want to talk to a human, then that's going to be the good choice for you. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
saying
wasn't promoting them. I took them on a long time ago.
Yeah, no, they definitely are a huge fiscal sponsor.
yeah, and they also you're talking about Fractured Atlas, because they will also do other kinds of arts projects, so
Oh,
not
they do dance,
just
painting,
film. Yeah,
theater, you name it. If it's
Yep.
arts, they cover it. And in fact, for people who are applying to NISCA and need a New York-based fiscal sponsor, we usually say talk to Fractured Atlas.
Yeah, there was a question actually in the
Yeah.
chat about New York-based fiscal sponsors, and I know a few people have posted some.
There's NIFA, Fractured Atlas, Gotham. There are others, but those are the ones off the top of my head.
Yep. Julie, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm feeling shy. Can you spotlight me?
I
Hi, Lynette. Thank you for being here. My question is, like, I just had this impression that fiscal sponsors, maybe there are some fiscal sponsors that do it this way, that maybe they have a page on their website, such and such a film, donate here, and they don't do much more beyond that. Do you think that is a model that some practice where it's not really, all up in the business of the film and it's just kind of a passive, some bookkeeping services, we could say?
I think some do that for sure. And so when you are considering who might be a good fiscal sponsor for your project, it is like, what else do they offer? Is this what they do? Or is this something they'll do? slight difference there. How many projects do they have? How well do they know fiscal sponsorship? It's complicated, and it takes the learning curve actually does take years. And somehow I ended up in this very unique niche that I now know a lot about, but it took a long time to get to where, you know, the knowledge that I have about it. And you know, we want to be part of it. The Film Collaborative, that's what we're all about. We are all about being supportive of the project and helping you. And so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you know, you got to find the one that's the right fit for what you're looking for, the kind of relationship you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
You might not want to ever talk to someone, and so one of those fiscal sponsors is going to be good for you. Or you might want to be able to send an email and get an answer and
Mm-hmm.
have a Zoom, and then that's when Film Collaborative might be right one for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. So we still have time if anybody has any, like, you know, burning questions. We've still got a few minutes. One question I have, which kind of gets back, I guess, into the tax implications a little bit, which has to do with at what point does the project, as opposed to the fiscal sponsor, you know, if they get a grant and, you know, they get it in
Yep.
2024, but they
Mhm.
know they're not going to spend it all in 2024. How does that work in terms of the tax implications? Can they
Absolutely
store it at the fiscal sponsor until they need it?
correct. So do all the fundraising you can all the time. We will receive it. We have a database that keeps very good records of what came in for your project. And then you withdraw funds as you have expenses. You absolutely do not want to get a large grant, draw it all down at once, and find yourself on December 31st with, oh crap, I have $50,000 of unspent money and I'm going to get taxed on that. So draw it down as you have expenses. We pay out a couple times a week. All you do is submit an invoice with expenses that you're either going to pay or have paid, and you're getting a reimbursement. List it. They should match the budget. And if it doesn't, give us a new budget, and we'll pay you. And then you'll never end up with that situation of extra money on your hands, which is only a bad thing on December 31st when now is carried over and it's just income, because you will get a 1099 if you're an LLC or an individual. Corporations do not get a 1099, but they still need to report.
Susan.
Thanks. Hi. Been very informative. I thought I knew about fiscal sponsorship. But I'm just curious as to what is the niche, if any, of Filmmakers Collaborative. Or put it another way, what kind of films are you looking for?
Okay, so actually, I'm going to address the first thing you said and then answer the second thing. There's a group, and there's a Filmmakers Collaborative in San Francisco, and another one with a similar name in New England. And when the Film Collaborative started, those groups, I think, existed, but were not as active as they are now. And I ran into someone from the Filmmakers Collaborative at a party at Getting Real a few weeks ago. And so we talked about how we get each other's email. Very similar names. We're the Film Collaborative. They're the Filmmakers Collaborative. It happens all the time. We also get called the Film Collective quite a bit. So I just wanted to clarify who we actually are, but to tell you that it's okay, because it happens all the time. So your second question is, remind me again.
What kind of films are you looking for?
Oh, well, we work, like I said, with predominantly docs, but a lot of narratives as well. And what we're really looking for is this a good film? Does this sound like a good idea? Should this film be made? Is it a well thought out idea? do you have a team that can execute the project? Is a budget appropriate for the project? And then what is your fundraising plan? Do you actually have a use for fiscal sponsorship? So you'll notice that I didn't say anything about subject matter. The Film Collaborative really does a lot of work in certain niches, a lot of LGBT projects, a lot of environmental, social issue content. So those really where we're shining and work with a lot. Those are the types of films that the distribution side of things works with a lot. For that said, in the fiscal sponsorship program, I should also say we'd really like diversity and underrepresented filmmakers, women, people of color, everything, and that we're really working in that area a lot, and films about things like that as well. That said, if it's a film, we'll talk to you, we'll look at it. What we're really looking for is this project fundable? Can it get made? Should it get made? Is it something that we can support?
Thank you so
Answer you.
much. And thank you
Okay.
for your question, Susan. So I think we're coming to the end of our time. I'm sure that people have many more questions. So hopefully, Lynnette, you can put in the chat where they could direct those questions, but please read the FAQ first.
Sure. Yes,
Um,
FAQs. Fill out the inquiry form. The inquiry form on the how to apply page just gives me some basic information about what the project is, and helps me prepare to schedule a call with you. And then I know the basics, and it gives me a jumping off point instead of spending, our 30 minutes with you telling me about the project when we could have started from a place where I already know. I always give the filmmakers an opportunity to expand on what they write, but we really appreciate it when people use that inquiry form, trying to circumvent it. And this is important, circumventing it only makes it complicated for me to track. So please use that form. And I'll set up a call with you or a Zoom, well, usually a Zoom, and we'll talk. I do want to add that during the first 2 weeks of July, everything will remain open, but we are not going to be responding to applicants and inquiries during those 2 weeks. But those are generally the quietest 2 weeks of the year anyway, so probably shouldn't be a problem. But unless somebody comes to me, sends an email, flag it. If you have a project that is happening quickly, you have a donor waiting, the donation is substantial, we want to be able to help if we can, flag it to me. Otherwise, we will respond after the 15th if your inquiry comes in during that 2-week time period.
because even Lynnette needs a vacation from time to time.
The thing is, the fiscal sponsorship never ever stops. Money is always coming in, money is always going out. People always want to know fundraising things. People are always applying for grants and then asking me for certain things that funders ask for, such as audit, 990, budget, everything. So, we try to be as responsive as we can, but it also means that it never stops.
Right. Well, I just want to thank you again for taking time to be with us today. As we mentioned at the top, we are recording this session. We'll have an edited version on our YouTube channel in about a week. So either if you're already on the D-Word mailing list, we'll let you know in one of our weekly emails about that, or you can subscribe directly on our YouTube page. But Lynnette, I just, really appreciate your time, your candor, and your knowledge, really, that you shared with everyone today.